Cidi Otieno is the Secretary General of the Kenya Peasants League, and Felistus Mwalia is a project officer at Root Food Initiative, which is by the Hendrik Ball Foundation. A very good morning. Thank you very much for joining us, Cidi and Felistus. How are you, Felistus?
I'm fine, thank you.
Are you well?
Yes.
Are you comfortable?
Yes, I'm trying to be very comfortable.
This is the hot seat of the Situation Room, so it's warm. All right?
Yes.
We want to make you feel warm, comfortable, relaxed, feel at home. We're talking about things that I'm sure you're very passionate about, which is about food security in the country and looking at our food systems. Cidi as well, good morning.
Good morning, Tito.
Good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
You are the Secretary General of the Kenya Peasants League.
Yes.
Who's a peasant?
A peasant is a smallholder food producer. And you find that since the days of the fight for independence, the freedom fighters were fighting for land. They were peasants because they were dispossessed by the colonial government. And so a peasant is basically a smallholder food producer who has been forgotten by the government since independence, because you find that most of the policies of government focus on large scale, mostly cash crop for export. So you find that you hear about Galana Kulalo, those are large scale, but very little is going towards the peasant. So a peasant is just a smallholder food producer who is relying on rain and they're relying on family labor to be able to produce food. Yeah.
And who are the beneficiaries of this produce? Are we talking about, your kitchen garden variety, or are we talking about, a half acre kind of thing that you can now then sell, or is it then for personal sustenance?
Well, the main objective of a smallholder is for sustaining themselves. Yeah. So you find that a family of, let me say, 5, 6, they must first of all produce to sustain themselves, and then if there's any surplus, then they take to the market. But you find that most of the efforts by multinationals or government is to turn this smallholder producer to a business person. So you find that somebody is producing food that they cannot eat, food for export. Yeah. So as a Kenya Peasant League, we focus on mobilizing smallholder. Myself, I'm a smallholder farmer, so that we produce for our own first, and once we have surplus, then we take to the market.
Okay. How many members do you have in this league? And how do you recruit members?
First of all, any smallholder producer or consumer who believes that food production should be for sustainability is a member. We are actually now in 6 counties and 17 clusters. So we organize farmers into clusters. So each cluster is composed of between 20 to 100 smallholder food producers. So currently active members, we are over 2,000 active members across the country. But we also have people who associate with us, or people who come to our activities. Yeah. So that one can go beyond that number, but active members are over 2,000 members.
Do I understand you to be saying that your membership comprises of people who are either working towards being able to feed themselves first, or they've actually gotten to the point where they can actually feed themselves now?
What I mean is that the main objective to produce food is for you to feed yourself. You find that if you look at the agribusiness model, for example, you find that when a farmer is rearing chicken, they get the best to the market and eat the sick ones, or those ones who are almost dying. Yeah. But in our agroecology, we do the opposite, because you don't produce for the market, you're producing for your family. So why do you take the best to the market and eat the ones that are almost dying? So basically what we are saying is that you have to produce for your own livelihood. And that's why we are producing food. Yeah. So you find that, for example, you find the multinationals coming to the rural areas saying, we want to mobilize farmers, produce French beans for export. So you're basically producing what you cannot eat as a farmer.
So you're against that?
What we are saying is that
you're against amalgamation of farmers to produce cash crops.
Contract farming is slavery. Yeah, because the land is yours, but you're producing, you can't dictate what to produce. And that's what Mau Mau fought. They were saying that we want freedom and land. We want to have a right to decide what to grow, a right to decide what seeds to grow. So if a farmer cannot keep their seeds, for example, we have seed banks. If a farmer is relying on a multinational to come and give them seed, then they are slaves. And that's what the Mamau fought. Yeah, they were saying that we want our land back so that we can produce for our families and for our nation.
Okay.
Yes.
Cidi, a majority of tea farmers in Kenya are smallholder farmers. Coffee farmers are smallholder farmers. They're not producing so that they can take the coffee or the tea. Are you against that?
Very much. You know what? We have had a lot of debates, even around the GMO issue, where the government is saying that that's a silver bullet to hunger or to food insecurity. To us, we are saying that we have not had land reforms, for example. I come from Awendo, where we have Sony sugar. And if most farmer with a half an acre or a quarter an acre is growing sugarcane, which takes 3 years to be harvested. And then after harvesting, it takes another 1 year to be paid. That's 4 years, surely. You only have 1 acre of land. This land can be productive when you produce food. Because you can't eat sugarcane, you can't eat coffee. That farmer who is producing tea or coffee cannot afford a cup of coffee at Java. And they're working. So you see, and you see, if you look at even the payment, we have had coffee farmers uprooting their plants. Why? Because even the payment is very little.
So you're advocating for these farmers, the sugarcane farmer, the tea farmer, the coffee farmer, the pyrethrum farmer, to uproot these things and plant food.
Grow food. No, if you are not food secure, you can't develop. And hungry, even you are in the studio now, if you are hungry, you can't be here.
You can't work, man.
Yeah, you can't work.
Let's get a middle ground here, shall we?
Yes.
Okay? Is it not possible to have what I was taught when I was a very young person called mixed farming, meaning you can farm something for, say, the market, but you can also farm something that you can
for
sustain
consumption
yourself with?
Of course, the main objective should be your own food. Because all of us have taken tea, maybe, or all of us ate yesterday night, you ate ugali. Do you know who grew that maize? If you are not growing it, then who is growing it for you? So each one of us, if you have a small garden, grow vegetables, grow food. Because the reason why the food is expensive is because few of us are growing food. But majority of us want that food. So you are growing avocado to take to China. When will Chinese feed us? What we want saying is that before you grow avocado to China, grow maize that you can eat, grow vegetables. And then when you have surplus land, then that's when we can think about. And that's why the government policies are geared towards export oriented. And since the colonial days, the agricultural system in Kenya was for Kenyans or Africans to produce food for the European market or for the US market. That has not changed. So the problem of food insecurity is not about GMO or not. It's about government policies not promoting local food production. Kenya is a net importer of eggs.
Yeah.
Net importer of eggs. For God's sake.
Felistus,
Can't we rear chicken?
Indeed. And even as you're asking this question, Felistus, so, obviously, the question is, so what is the route to food? You talk about this quite often, managing these programs. What is the route to food? And food, in this case, being that, we can feed ourselves. What's that route?
So basically, the Route to Food, first I can just introduce what we do as the Route to Food Initiative. The Route to Food Initiative, it's a program of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and we do champion for the realization of the human right to food through sustainable farming systems like agroecology, or basically what you said, mixed farming. And for us, the route to achieve food security in the country is by pushing for sustainable food and farming system and ensuring that smallholder farmers are included in the system to ensure also the aspect of sustainability, not just producing food for the sake of producing food, but also looking at the environmental aspect. Is the way we're producing food safe? We're producing food. Is the consumption aspect? Is the food really safe? Nutritional benefit, is the food really nutritional beneficial to all Kenyans?
So where do you ply your trade? Who do you work with? And where do you work with these people? And is there a focus on certain types of crops And if so, why so?
First, we really don't work with farmers. We really don't work closely with farmers, so I can't really say there are specific
Who do you
crops.
work with?
Yeah, so basically we work with media first to create awareness, and we also work with Kenyans in general, the public, to create awareness around food systems and sustainable food systems. And we also try as much as possible to work with the political class, because they're the people who also have the power to ensure that our food systems really fit to the needs of Kenyans.
There's a report called the Global Hunger Index 2022. And there's a report for Kenya. Tell us about it. What's it about, and what have you found in terms of the hunger index with regards to Kenya?
The Global Hunger Index is a tool published by World Hunger Health, and the most interesting thing that I really found with the Global Hunger Index is the situation which Kenya is in right now. We are ranked 94 out of 121 countries, and the situation in Kenya is not really pleasing. According to the Global Hunger Index, the situation is really serious, as
194th?
94 out of 121 countries.
So 94 is not good.
It's not
94 of the hungriest countries on earth.
Yes,
Okay.
in the world. And the score there is 23.5, which is rated as very serious. And the statistics also are really not so good, because food insecurity is as high as 69% of the total population are hungry. That's more than 37 million Kenyans. That's over 80% of the population cannot afford a healthy diet.
Did we not also see that the numbers we're looking at is about 1 million children this year being mal and undernourished? So if we're looking at issues of nourishment for children getting towards that age where they need most of their nutrition to then be able to develop, so that also poses a problem. The numbers that you're looking at now, can we connect the two? Like Cidi was talking about where you say, Cidi, looking at these numbers, I mean, okay, it paints a pretty grim picture.
Very, 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 very grim picture.
And what you're saying is that if these same Kenyans, the 37 million that we're talking about, the families of these 1 million children, what are we saying that you can actually do then to contribute to then a positive, a higher score on this index? Okay, but then also that we have food.
You know, one thing is that Kenya rely mostly on rain-fed agriculture. So when the rains fail, then farmers are suffering, and most of the farmers can't afford irrigation. So one thing that we are talking about here is that the government should invest in water, for example, water harvesting, for example, so that in the rural areas, the farmers should get water. You know, when we're talking about addressing the food shortage using multinationals, for example, you know, we have what is called, if you go to Kiboko, Calro, you find what is called water efficient maize for Africa, WEMA. They're saying this maize can withstand harsh conditions, but yet at Calro they're using a lot of water for the water efficient maize. You see, it's an irony. Yeah? So what we are saying is that when we have the government investing in farm inputs, for example, local farm inputs, we have the government must invest in water for the rural food producers, because according to the FAO, the smallholders, food producers, feed or produce over 70% of the food on the table, yet with very little support. So it means that if the government can just invest a little in improving the conditions, the farming conditions, improving on the market, improving on the accessibility of farm inputs, then we are going to improve on the index. Because if you look at 94 out of 121, it's quite sad. And it tells you that many people are really suffering. But apparently there's no reprieve, because if you look at what the government is focusing on right now is targeting those people who are growing for export. So when you are growing for export, then who is growing food for us? That's the question. It means the food is coming from outside Kenya, and it's going to be expensive, because the food miles, if you look at the food miles, rice from China, for it to come to Kenya, the miles, you see, alone, when it reaches the shelf of a shop, it has to go up. But when we support our farmers to produce food consumed locally, then we are going to revive the food economy. We are going to revive our local markets that are collapsing. We are going to revive even those farmers, because they have kids going to, today, I'm telling you, so many farmers can't take their kids to school, yet they produce food for export.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
We'll be back. 28 minutes to 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We are talking about transforming our food systems and also looking at our local governance. Our guests this morning, Cidi Otieno is a peasant farmer. He is the Secretary General of the Peasants League of Kenya. And Felistus Mwalia is a project officer at Root to Food Initiative, an initiative by the Henrik Ball Foundation. Keep it here for that. For more coming up shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
And our guests are Felistus Mwalia from Root to Food Initiative and Cidi Otieno, Secretary General, Kenya Peasants League. We're talking about our food systems then, Cidi. And one obvious question would be, what do we need to do to tweak our food systems so then we can go take that journey towards food security?
Yeah, in fact, we talk about food sovereignty. Yeah, because food security actually does not address access, because people are hungry not because there's no food, but the distribution of that food. So you find in some parts like Nyandarua, you find sometimes people throwing cabbages, and in Turkana there's no food. So the issue of distribution, and that's why we are saying that food should not be a factor, or should not be a factor of trade or market forces, because if I can't afford food, it doesn't mean food is not there. Food is there. We have restaurants. We have food in the market. So food sovereignty is basically making sure that there is accessibility to food in terms of distribution and the market infrastructure. So you know, if you talk to someone who is bringing omena from Sindo to Nairobi, they are being taxed.
You need to mention where Sindo is.
Sindo is in Nyanza.
No, Sindo,
Homa Bay County.
Homa Bay County.
Yes. And you find that that person, business person who is taking one sack of omena, they have to have a license of 16,000 shillings. They have to have what. So by the time that omena is reaching Kangemi market or Kikomba market, it's expensive. So the government needs to remove these taxes on food, because you cannot talk about feeding the people yet you are taxing. You know, we have got some laws.
So we need to remove tax on
food, because food is a human right. It's a
tax or levies,
basic human right, whichever. You find that there's issues of double taxation. For example, you go to Kangemi market, you are being taxed to get a license. Then there's this Kanjo guys coming to take 100 shillings per week, you know. So you find that you are being taxed like 3 times on the same commodity.
But Cidi, these are licenses and fees. Are you saying we also waive licenses and fees in markets?
You know, we have tax holidays for multinationals. 10 years tax holiday. A multinational coming to Kenya, 10 years, they're not paying taxes.
Yeah, but
now the question is,
they pay business permits.
Of course. And what I'm saying is that if the government is really serious in making sure that there's accessibility of food, as Article 43 is saying, the right to adequate food of acceptable quality, then the government needs to subsidize. You see, that's what we're talking about. Because if the Article 43 is saying that the government has a responsibility to offer social security to those who cannot feed themselves and their families and dependents, then how can the government ensure that we implement Article 43? Is by ensuring that we don't care whether Munga is 500 shillings. Let government pay 450, let us pay 50 shillings. Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about. That's why we have a government. And when you have a government that cannot feed the people, then we are wondering. So, the issue of the food production system. Look, if the farmers don't own the seed, if the farmers don't have water, if the farmers don't own land, then we cannot have food security. Because we are having farmers depending every season to buy seeds in the market, go plant them. Farmers don't have labor. So you find that the rural urban migration, for example, most young men are in the slums, in the cities, leaving the older generation in the rural areas. The older generation, our mothers, our grandmothers, don't have energy to till land. And their sons and daughters in the cities don't have jobs, so they can't even send money back home for farms to be grown. So the government needs to take very powerful governments historically have been brought down because of hunger.
Can we let's make a direct connection between that what you've just said, that if you have those who are able-bodied and who are able then to essentially till the land to farm, and we're saying that one of the ways to be able to do this is to feed ourselves first, as opposed to then farming, growing food for export. Where would the government come in here to say, look, let's have us growing our own food first before then growing food for export? If the land is available in the rural areas, the aged are not able to till the land. We have people coming into the urban centers and have no jobs. Would the government come in here to have that happen?
The reason why people are coming to urban areas is conditions. You find that the conditions in the rural areas, the infrastructure is very poor. So most young men and women, perhaps those who have graduated or those who have finished school, they find rural areas not favorable for them. That's why they're moving to urban areas. If you look at the Declaration on the Peasant Right, the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Peasants, it says that all governments must invest in infrastructure in the road. They must have access to water, electricity, healthcare, good schools, incentives to make these people remain there and start farming. You would imagine if we are importing eggs, how much is an egg?
15 shillings.
To 20 shillings, for example. Some places 20 shillings one egg. So if you are importing 1 million eggs, that is 20 million shillings going out of Kenya. And if we would have invested in these young people to produce these eggs, then this 20 million would remain in this country. So what we are saying is that the capital flight is not about even brain drain, it's about even capital drain. And I like what Tanzania government did. Yesterday I was watching a clip of the Tanzanian president, and she was saying that they want to give young people land and incentives to grow food, so that you don't have to live in Kangemi or Kibra. But if government tells you we are going to provide you with land, till land, produce food because we want to be food secure or food sovereign as a country, then we are going to have a situation whereby we are going to reduce the deficit, so that we reduce the importation of food. It's an irony that we are exporting rice from where and importing rice from China. That's an irony, you see. And all this boils down to debts, because the government needs to get foreign exchange dollars to service the debts, and that informs the government policies of promoting the export-oriented agriculture, so that they can earn that dollar to service the debts. So what we are saying is that yes, we have to service the debts, but at the same time we have to feed ourselves. So the government needs to strike the balance. And when we heard that this government was saying no, we're not to debts, we are very happy, but we are again sad, because we are hearing that 500 billion has been, and the government is still going to IMF, to World Bank to borrow money.
Borrowing is still continuing.
Yes.
Felistus, at Root to Food, you have looked at our food systems. Do you have specific recommendations on things that need to be tweaked around to transform our food systems?
Yeah. So first, we really need to see an investment towards agricultural systems that are a bit diversified beyond major projects, because at the moment you're only seeing the government focusing on large-scale food production, the Galana Kulalu project. So we really need to see the government investing as well on small-scale farmers who are really working on sustainable food and farming techniques.
They'll tell you they're doing that.
But many farmers who practice sustainable farming techniques are really complaining.
What is sustainable farming technique? Maybe that's where the issue would be. Because the government will tell you, look, we are spending how many billions right now importing fertilizer, subsidizing to go to the small-scale smallholder farmer. We are spending the same kind of amount of money to support our smallholder farmers with seed. And also looking at how we can recruit more people so that they can be agricultural extension officers to support the smallholder farmer. So
yeah. So basically what's happening here is that the government has really not consulted these small-scale farmers on their needs, because most of these farmers, it's not really that. Some of the farmers who really practice sustainable techniques, they really don't require external inputs to produce food, because at the end of the day, when you look at farmers who are really relying on pesticides, it's not even sustainable, Eric.
Yeah, and maybe
Each
Are you
seed-
saying that now, Route to Food, you've actually consulted the farmers, and this is what the farmers are saying?
we work closely with some farmers, and these are their needs actually, that they need support, but not necessarily on external inputs like pesticides and fertilizers, because at the end of the day, they create a dependency.
What other support do they need that besides
Farmer to farmer exchange knowledge, because farmers have the knowledge when it comes to sustainable farming practices, but at the end of the day, we see private institutions coming in and taking in that space. So we really need to see the government supporting farmer to farmer exchange, and also farmer managed seed systems. And Cidi can actually talk so well because he's worked really close on seed systems.
Yeah, you see, government is talking about fertilizers, pesticides, and some of this, like Roundup, it has been banned in the UK, in Europe. You see, they have been banned. They are not being used. If you look at things like GMOs, over 70% of EU countries have banned GMOs. They're saying they don't need it because there are uncertainties about it. And then you want to come and download them onto Kenyan farmers. Yet, the farmers have kept these seeds for millions of years. Our grandfathers and parents have been keeping these seeds. So what we need from the government is accessible financing. Because one, the farmers don't have access to finance maybe labor in the farms. You see, so you find that somebody has got 3 acres of land, but they can only grow half because they don't have money. So, and again, so when talking about sustainable food systems, we're looking at even climate, because the producing a pesticide or fertilizer, chemical fertilizers, is fossil fuel intensive. They promote climate change. So we cannot talk about fighting climate change, yet we are adopting a food production system that is emitting fossil fuel in the atmosphere. That's why we're talking about training. They're talking about extension. It is nowhere now. Nowadays, there are no extension services. That's why as Kenya Peasants League, we are having the brigades, the youth brigades, and their work is to go to the farms, talk to the farmers, till land for those who cannot till land. We need the government to invest in extension. If you look at the seed laws in this country, the government is talking about seed inspectors coming to your farm, inspecting what seeds you are keeping, whether they're certified, yet they cannot support extension officers. So what we are saying is that food sovereignty is about the food producer controlling the food production system from the seed to the table. So we don't want to see people coming in lorries in Kitale to buy maize because the government has failed to buy this maize from the farmers. So
why can't farmers move and do all these things? Why must government be involved? Why must the government be
farmers
involved?
Are taxpayers
in
paying taxes.
peer-to-peer?
Farmers are taxpayers.
That's true.
Yeah. So
but why must the government support peer-to-peer farmer education? Farmers can organize themselves and have a farmer exchange program.
Of course,
farmers can organize themselves and decide we are going into organic farming. Why does the government have to?
Yeah, the government has to come in because one, maybe we have clusters in Machakos County, in Katangi, and other clusters in Siaya, Poyo, or Mariwa. You see, these farmers need to exchange knowledge, and the government has to provide conditions, favorable conditions for these farmers.
Eric asked a valid question. Why must the government do this?
Because we are paying taxes to the government.
No, Cidi.
Yes.
You are absolutely right. Huh?
Yes.
Why I'm asking this question, almost mirroring what Eric has asked.
Yes.
We are having this discussion because it isn't happening, isn't it?
Yes.
And we are still saying we want the government to make it happen. Now, who is suffering? The farmer. So why don't they find ways of doing it?
Of course, you see.
That is what we're asking.
You see, already within the Kenya Peasants League space, we have farmer exchange programs.
Yes.
But you see, what we are saying is that they are not adequate enough, because they are happening. Farmers have to move on their own expense.
Yes.
From Machakos to Siaya.
Yes.
You see, and one thing, we have never had any day in SpiceFM you saying that today the president did not go because they didn't have fuel, or because they did not go to. Where is this money coming from?
What we are saying
is this,
Cidi, what we're addressing.
The government policies. It boils down to the policies, because if you are not in the policy, you are not in.
Cidi, we actually take your point of view and we are supporting it.
Yes.
The only thing we are saying, this dependency is not working. This expectation is not working. So why are we occupying ourselves with time waiting for it to happen when it will not happen?
What we are saying, because, farmers are doing a lot. developing land races, for example, in their farms, doing research, saying this crop can do you find women, the custodians of seeds, they can tell you this seed is good and this seed is bad. That's a knowledge that needs to be documented, and this knowledge needs to be shared. What we are saying is that, yes, as farmers, they are doing what they can, but if you look at the economic situation, it is not adequate enough. And that's why we are saying that if you look at the Malabo Declaration, talking about 10% of the GDP should go to food production. Kenya is doing 3%. And Kenya was part of the Malabo and Maputo declarations, which says that we must produce 10% of our GDP should go to food production. If we are doing 3%, it means that it is inadequate to have an adequate exchange between the farmers. If you look at, there's no effort. In fact, the Seeds and Plant Varieties Act in Kenya criminalizes seed exchange among the farmers. They say you can be jailed for 6 months or so, or pay a fine of 1 million just for me to take my seeds and give it to Felistus here. Why do we still have policies that are criminalizing our way of life? That's why we are saying that the reason why the government is not supporting smallholders is because of such policies and laws that must be repealed so that
when was that law put in place?
I think the Seeds and Plant Varieties Act has been around 6 years, but those are laws that date back to the colonial period times.
Yes.
when
it was restrictive, but
60 years after independence, we still have a law in Kenya that says that if I take my seeds and give to Felistus, I can pay 1 million. And yet we are having the same government policies telling us that now we have to import GMOs to give the farmers. So exchanging GMOs is good.
Maybe just to add on, maybe just to add on the aspect of farmer managed farmer to farmer knowledge. Yes, it's happening. Farmers are actually mobilizing themselves. But what we really need to see is the government integrating farmer knowledge into extension programs.
Yes, exactly.
And the other thing that I also wanted to add is the aspect on trying to ensure that when we are fighting the food insecurity that's happened, we really need to link it with a rights-based approach and remove it necessarily it being as a function of the Ministry of Agriculture, because the Ministry of Agriculture only focuses on the production aspect, and food security, when you measure food security, it goes beyond the production aspect. And even as a right to food is a social and economic rights, and under the right to food, under social and economic rights, they are linked and they're interrelated. So even trying to ensure that we're fighting food insecurity only as a Ministry of Agriculture function is a bit...
Okay. Do you think the government will listen to you if this conversation is where it's at? Or do you think they'll listen to you better if you actually organize yourself and the very thing you're hoping the government will do, you actually start doing it, and you approach them and say, this is where we are at. What we need is to move here. Because if you are asking, because the asking has been taking place for some time now, and what you're asking for isn't taking place, yet we have an entire ministry that's supposed to deal with these matters. And you may even find their policies in place that support what you're saying. But why we're having this discussion again, it's not being actioned. What am I saying? There are times when you look at a situation that is as dire as food security, if the idea is to talk to the government and wait for the government, then what do you think is going to happen? And yet there are things you can do. There are things you can enhance. There are things you can actually ensure get done so that this journey you're talking about, not only does it begin, but it's actually moving forward.
You are right. In fact, 2 weeks ago we were in Migori County and we met with the various departments as a movement. And you are right. We also have to engage the government and tell them that, come on, you are in your offices, but this is what's happening on the ground, and how can you be able to integrate? And we were happy that a county like Migori, for example, they were telling us, yes, we are going now to start supporting farmer seeds and exchange between the farmers. So we also need to influence, but as a movement, we also need to live that reality. That's why we are creating these clusters. We are mobilizing food producers. We are telling them that it's sustainable to produce using local farm inputs. It's sustainable to produce using local seeds. We have all these events. But what we are saying is that, yes, they are good policies. And sometimes the government hears the language, maybe when people go to the streets, you see. And that's why if you look at India, we had farmers' march for over 1 year. farmers going to the New Day telling the government that we don't want this policy. If it will take us to go that point, we'll tell farmers, come on, let's go and tell the government that this is what we are doing as farmers. It is not sufficient enough. We need support in terms of policies. If there are policies, like we are saying, that are supporting farmers, why are they not being implemented? It takes a push from the farmers so that the government can be able to listen to them.
Yeah. All right. I think the message is home, and it's a conversation that needs to continue happening, constantly on what do we need to do to transform our food systems, to make sure that our food systems are actually addressing our needs. How do you get to that, what we're calling food security, what Cidi is calling food sovereignty, and what is it that we need to do to get there? This is a conversation that happens today. It'll happen again and again and again when we'll invite Felistus Mwalia from the Root to Food Initiative and Cidi Otieno from the Kenya Peasant Farmers League.